So let me kick things off. I thank you all for coming and want to welcome you along with my brother Peter. We're co-hosts of this lecture series. And if you missed Phil's earlier lecture, you can see it on YouTube. We've got it on the on my YouTube channel. It's pretty easy to find. And today's lecture is called The Anthropology of Conspiracy Theories. And I'm really excited to bring Phil Stevens up to talk to us for about 40 minutes. And as questions occur to you, please put them in the chat. And once Phil finishes, I'll moderate a Q&A session until the hour. And I'll also be posting this recording on YouTube later. And I think that's all the housekeeping. How about if I hand over the microphone to Peter and ask him to introduce our dear brother, Phil.
Thanks, Ruth. I'm happy to do that. I want to welcome so many family and friends from across the country. And great to see you all, and I'm glad you're with us. Brother Phil, my older brother, our oldest brother in our clan, retired in 2019 after 48 years in the anthropology department at the University of Buffalo, State University of New York. He earned his his BA in English from Yale in '63, went to Nigeria with a Peace Corps to teach English and to work with the Nigerian government's Department of Antiquities to document, repair, and protect the famous stone images of SCA. I had the pleasure of visiting him there when I was graduated from college in '65. It's quite an experience. And it was in Nigeria that he first experienced sorcery and learned about African witchcraft beliefs. These experiences brought him into anthropology, and he entered the graduate program at Northwestern. And he conducted dissertation research in different areas of Nigeria from '69 to '71, earned his PhD in '73. He's conducted subsequent anthropological research in West Africa and the Caribbean, the author of a number of publications in cultural anthropology and African studies, and is a recipient of 2 awards for excellence in teaching. One of the things I've always admired about Phil, that he, as a college professor, he specialized in teaching and used to love to talk about his teaching and his students. One of his most popular courses at University of Buffalo was in the anthropology of magic, sorcery, and witchcraft, and he's writing a book on that topic now. He lectures frequently to community groups on subjects of current concern, including conspiracy theories. His most recent honor came in December 2012 when he received an honorary chieftaincy title from the king of the village of SCA in Nigeria in recognition of his work there. And some of you who were a part of his earlier lecture to us, perhaps a month ago, learned about the stone images of SCA. Today, we're going to hear about conspiracy theories, which is certainly something that all of us are aware of and concerned about and get riled up about or laugh off. So Phil can tell us the truth behind all of that. And there's Abby checking in from England. Abby and Bindi, welcome. That's great. Phil, over to you.
Thank you all. I'm going to share my screen and let's hope it comes up and everything works. How's that? Do you all see it?
Looks good. Looks good, Phil.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I want to dedicate this talk to Ruth. I did my earlier talk and I made an error in my little witty comments. If you attended my talk back in February that Ruth organized on the images of SCA, you might remember I made an oblique comment about Greek. I was referring to the old vaudeville line, I can speak every language except Greek. And the other fellow says, oh yeah, well, how about Spanish? And he said, oh, it's all Greek to me. And I was trying to be clever and shorten all of that. Ruth's accomplishments are all Greek to me. I said, she speaks Greek and I don't. Go to her website, which I have posted there, and have a look. She's a remarkable person in her field of direct marketing. And I thank Ruth for organizing this, and Peter for his introduction. I've got to shorten that. I'm sorry, that was a bit long, wasn't it? Let's get started here if we can. Now I can't move my screen. There we go. So conspiracy theories, we're inundated with them. They're in the news almost all the time. They are really weird, aren't they? They're curious, they're bizarre, they're even kooky, but harmless, right? No. As a professor of anthropology and a college educator for, as Peter said, 48 years, I am seriously concerned with what's happened to the process of thinking in our country and much of the rest of the world. You can read my text. I don't have to read it to you when I put up a body of text here, but I worked on this and I hope it's clear. This is really serious. It's indicative of a serious, what I'm calling a serious crisis in thinking. It not only causes people to make poor decisions, but it also can hurt people deeply by allegations that serious tragedies like the Sandy Hook shooting, for example, are in fact conspiratorial hoaxes. The causes are extremely complex, and so the solutions are complex as well, but it is an issue we must address. I want to discuss the terms I'm using: anthropology, the derivation of the word there from the Greek, and the systematic study of humankind. In America, anthropology is a four-field subject. My field is cultural anthropology, but all of the fields interact, and they are interdependent when we are looking for explanations of human behavior. When I titled something "The Anthropology of," I mean that it must contain perspectives from these three separate levels of cultural analysis. Ethnography is the data collection method that anthropologists use. Objective collection of data about what is going on, as well as what people say is going on. Ethnology is the cross-cultural comparative perspective of anthropology. This is among the most powerful theoretical mechanisms in all the social sciences. This is how we really come to our conclusions, our theoretical statements about American behavior, about North American, about Western, about African, ultimately about human behavior. Ethnology looks for patterns, it looks for correlations in its quest to find explanations. And ethnology also reveals that certain behaviors and beliefs and products are universal, culturally universal, found among all cultures and in all stages of recorded human history. This is a strong suggestion that what we're dealing with lies below the cultural level in the fundamental neurobiology of our species, probably rooted in our evolutionary biology. All three of these perspectives are valuable when we talk about conspiracy theories. The word conspiracy, meaning a plotting by a group of people, can have three separate meanings. It can be the act of formulating the conspiracy. It can be the conspiratorial agreement itself, or it can be the group of people who are so involved. Theory is one of the most misunderstood and misused words in the English language. It does not mean an educated guess. It means explanation. And as science advances, theory changes. Theory is fluid, and this fact is one of those that causes people to mistrust science, unfortunately. The history of America in modern centuries, recent centuries, has, especially since the 20th century, has been really driven by the unity, the coalescing of populations around certain mass conspiracy theories. So a couple of them, three of them are listed here. We're going to identify many more as we go along. In times of war, which generated these, the theories seem to be logical and credible, but as we look at the conspiracy theories that we are surrounded by, we realize that many of them are highly improbable. But a truism in social science is when social stress increases, the improbable becomes increasingly probable. Wild conspiracy theories move from the fringe into the mainstream. They become believed and acted upon by more and more people. Some of the more serious and indeed destructive of those modern theories I've identified here, the McMartin preschool case, which was recently reviewed just on the 11th of this month by a full-page article in the New York Times, lasted for 7 years, cost the state of California more than $15 million. You might remember it. Jump ahead to Pizzagate, go back to 1998 to the anti-vax movement, which was resurrected again in last year in the pandemic. The 2020 elections, what has been called Trump's big lie. John Bolton said to CNN or to Fox News, I guess it was, if the CIA really ought to study how this was done. If this could possibly be true, that thousands of election workers were in cahoots to change the vote over so many different polling stations in so many different states, and went on for so many days, and it was undetected. Boy, he said the CIA ought to learn how that was done. The China virus, and of course QAnon, this really screwy mishmash of beliefs. What is going on? Why do people believe these things? And that, of course, is the big question. We have to look into the methods of science. When science investigates anything, it follows two basic procedures. One is a search for correlation. Okay, I see what we're looking at. I have described what we're looking at. What else is going on? What factors, lateral factors, previous factors might be also going on that affect what we are seeing here? Conspiracy theories correlate with many things, primarily social anxiety. Go back through history and you'll see that the major theories of plotting by a dangerous outside group, which is widely accepted as an explanation for social problems, intensify during times of social anxiety. This is a truism. In terms of the conspiracy theories of today, I have identified these factors, which are all contributory. I think that the first two are supremely important, and the rest are all contributory. We will come back to these as we go along. The other angle of an investigation that the scientific method focuses on is function. So correlation, what else is going on, what other factors might be influencing what we see here, and function. What does this thing seem to do? What purpose does it seem to serve? But there are serious problems, just as with correlation. Correlation does not indicate cause. Correlation indicates something that we've got to investigate. Function is a problem when it's used as the basis for an explanation, because functions change and different perspectives on the same phenomenon can reveal different functions simultaneously. Functions of something change by time, by temperature, by perspective, by so on, a number of different factors. A functionalist explanation is like saying we have noses because they support glasses. I'm sure you've heard that one. Conspiracy theories serve certain obvious functions. They provide explanation in a confusing world. They give us a sense, by having an explanation, they give us a sense of control, which is extremely valuable. They provide us with a scapegoat, something or somebody else to blame. Scapegoating is universal. It's a human problem. It's found among animals as well. It provides a distraction. It gets our mind from our real problems and at least a temporary respite from what's right in front of us and gets us off into other directions. And of course, politicians know very well the value of such distractions. But an important function of conspiracy theories is, as I suggested earlier, they unite the group in opposition to an other, an outsider. That capital O is a social psychological term used for something outside of our group or our society. It creates a group of like-minded people who share concern and who unite in their shared concern and their opposition to the other. This becomes really important during times of social stress. And this we need to focus on. This is where we get into the biological level. Fears of dangerous others are universal. They have been recorded by anthropologists in all cultures. This includes dangerous creatures of the night. It includes boogeymen. It includes creatures outside which are lusting after human flesh, and especially children. They become valuable tools to parents in the socialization process. The boogeyman, even Santa Claus, as we know, can be used in this way. Be careful or Santa Claus will bypass our house. The fear of strangers in infants seems to be instinctive. It's been well documented by psychology, especially infants between 4 and 7 or 10 months old. When they're shown pictures of their parents, pictures of relatives, pictures of people who look like their parents or relatives, and then are shown pictures of people of another race or another ethnicity, or people whose hairstyles or facial paintings or whatever make them somehow grotesque. The startle response in the brains of these infants viewing these pictures of others has been recorded. It fades as the child grows up and becomes more comfortable and so on. But I think this is terrifically important. This is where it starts in the fundamental biology of our species. You know, Peter mentioned that one of my major interests has been in witchcraft for many years, especially the classical witch, the evil witch. Um, um, I have identified 14 attributes of the classical witch, which I am arguing constitute a prototype of conspiracy theories. This is my list of attributes of the classical diabolical witch: the flying, transforming, child-stealing, child-eating witch. And these traits are absolutely universal in human cultures. They constitute 14 fundamental human fears and fantasies. The witch is not a universal creature, but these attributes are. They are found in all cultures. They are parceled out among other phenomena, dangerous creatures of the night or whatever, you know. Social subversion, they are that dangerous other. The witch is intent on subverting our social order. They are most active at night. At night, people are diurnal. At night, they're supposed to be inside. The outside at night is filled with all kinds of danger for which people are not adapted. There are two supernatural abilities in my list. The witch is a supernatural creature, but the witch is a person. And 12 of these 14 are potentially real human behaviors. Numbers 3 and 4 are supernatural. The witch can change form. The witch can fly. The witch has a pet which shares its power, the familiar in Middle English. Witches of a community meet together periodically. The meeting of the witches is the word for the meetings of the witches is taken from Hebrew, because, as we'll see in a few minutes, the Jews were the first group to be rounded up and tried and executed as witches in the Middle Ages. Witches spread disease. In the spread of AIDS in Africa in the 1980s, the first job of AIDS workers was to assure people that AIDS is not spread by witchcraft. It is spread by sexual transmission and so on and so on. Witches, like so many other dangerous creatures of the night, so many other dangerous others out there, are interested in our children. Our children become a focus of many of these conspiracy theories that are found throughout history and around the world. Sexuality, number 9, is fundamental to being human. We are obsessed with our sexuality. We use it to identify ourselves. Success in it is a mark of human adult success. Failure in it is just failure. It is central to our being. Witches fool around with human sexuality in a lot of different ways. They engage in whatever we consider illicit, and they interfere with our own sexuality. Witches kidnap children or other human victims and fly away with them to the Sabbath and ritually murder them. They don't just kill them, they kill them as part of an elaborate ritual. And then they dismember the body of the person and perform some ritual with the blood and the body parts before they eat the flesh and drink the blood of their human victims. Cannibalism and vampirism are common elements of conspiracy theories everywhere. And witches are associated with death in several different ways. Primarily, they kill. They get nutrition from death. Their Sabbath is held in a place of death, like a cemetery or an execution ground. All of these attributes, I argue, constitute the archetype of human conspiracy theories. Witches are ancient. Christianity gave new shape to witch beliefs, but they long predate Christianity. There are reports of flying, transforming, child-stealing creatures from classical Greece. One of the most pernicious, the longest and most and really most terrible are various forms of anti-Semitism. This horrible picture comes from a bridge at Frankfurt, engraved in the 15th century. Witches were this is how witches are nurtured, right? How Jews are nurtured. Jews were accused of kidnapping Christian children and sacrificing them, ritually cutting them up, circumcising them first, of course, as in this engraving, and then using their blood and body parts to make their Passover matzah. This was one of the accusations against Jews in the 15th, 14th, and 14th century and thereafter, especially after the Black Plague entered Western Europe. And as I said, Jews were the first group to be collectively persecuted as witches. And in the turn of the last century, one of the most horrible conspiracy theories was published. This one took on a life which was
Phil, you muted yourself.
Phil, could you turn on your speaker, please, on your microphone?
Just a minute, I've got to go back. Sorry, everybody. No, you can hear me now. I'm unmuted.
Just when you were getting to the good part, Phil.
I'm getting there. I'm trying to find.
Dad, it's okay. Speaking as somebody who uses Zoom every day, all day, I do this a lot. So you're in good company.
Why can't I bring this back?
It's the button. It's the button to the lower right, Phil, next to the, yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's the one.
What are you pointing at?
Yeah,
This
the one, this is it. Yep, your arrow's right over it now. There you go.
Very sorry, folks. Can you all hear me?
Yep, doing well, Phil.
No, I've got to go back because I lost my place.
Yeah.
The Protocols of the Elders of Zion was a horrible hoax invented in Russia at the end of the 19th century, published in 1903, as you can see here, translated into multiple languages, and it appeared all over the world for the next 100 years or more. It was based on a story by Maurice Joly called The Dialogue in Hell Between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, a political satire, but it is used that as the foundation for presenting an elaborate plot revealed by a spy that attended a meeting of a group of Zionist elders in Basel, Switzerland. The actual date of that meeting is published, in which they discuss their plot for world domination. That's what it's all about. And the Protocols was highly influential in many different cultures. Henry Ford published the whole thing in his Dearborn Independent, the newspaper from Dearborn, Michigan. And it admittedly influenced Adolf Hitler. He talks about it in Mein Kampf, and it formed a part of the impetus for the anti-Semitism of the Third Reich. Here are some covers of various various editions of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is a Swedish edition from 1924, a German edition, I think from 1934. My picture has gone off my screen, but the date is down there somewhere, I think. The idea, the Jewish idea of the Messiah is the translation there. This is a French edition of 1934. Another with a different motif, caricature of the universal Jew in 1934. A Brazilian edition of 1937, and a Spanish edition of 1963. This is the latest one that I have, but it came up again and again into the 1950s and 1960s. In the 1960s and 1970s, a new fear spread across America and through Western Europe, a fear of cults, dangerous cults who again were plotting to subvert our children. This is one of the best books about the great American cult scare of the 1960s and 70s, one I recommend to students. Its publication date is 1981 by Indiana University Press. David Bromley and Anson Shoup are sociologists of religion. And it focuses on these five groups. You recognize them. And it really took an anthropological method. Instead of sitting back and making pronouncements about what such groups do and how they think, Bromley and Shoup went in and talked to members of the groups about why they had joined and what they feel the group is doing for them. And they came up with what then were really some radical revelations that in all cases, the members had chosen to join and they got great benefit out of being members. In all cases, there were no instances of brainwashing or of the megalomaniacal leader who worked his will on hapless victims. There is, of course, that element in some cases, but in the majority of these alternative religions and groups that got the label of cults in the 1970s were actually considered highly beneficial and very important to the members. But the rest of us were feared them, and we were all terrified by a whole lot of stories about what their actual intentions were. Wicca is a form of modern nature worship whose members call themselves witches, and that was their first mistake, because the word witch and witchcraft have such a terrible history in Western culture. This is Gerald Gardner. These are his dates, an Englishman living near the New Forest in southwestern England, who established Wicca in 1939. He is considered to be the father of Gardnerian witchcraft. Appealed mostly to women, but also to men. It was peaceful. It was socialist, egalitarian, non-hierarchical, and it empowered women, and it stressed goodness and nature. The next slide is Alex Sanders, who was an American who established a new form of Wicca, which he called after his own name, Alexandrian witchcraft. This is Alex Sanders. And these are some symbols of witchcraft. Circle Farm in Wisconsin became the American Center for Wicca. They published a newsletter and a lot of interviews with people who had new methods of celebrating nature. The labels are clear enough, but many branches of Wicca choose to perform naked, which they call sky-clad, feeling that clothes inhibit the flow of energy between people and nature. And these pictures come from the classic book by the late Margot Adler, a book called Drawing Down the Moon, which is named for one of the rituals of Wicca, and is really the best collective book on that phenomenon. Margot Adler, you might remember, was a writer for many New York publications. She sadly died a few years ago. And Wicca, modern witchcraft, whose members call themselves witches, and cults and fears of danger to children, laid the roots for fears of Satanism in the 70s and 80s. Anton LaVey, founder of the Church of Satan, these are some of his publications. The Church of Satan in San Francisco. LaVey's Satanism is rather hedonism. He said Christians are hypocrites. They preach one thing, but they do exactly what they preach against. Come and join us, he said, and be honest. If certain acts give you pleasure and they harm no one else, come and do them and be honest about it. Self-pleasure was one of those acts which the Church of Satan promoted. However, the fact that he called himself a Satanist and his organization's Satanism made him the subject of condemnation. This symbol, which has its roots way back in the 14th century, became associated with the Knights Templars. This modern version of it was created by an occultist in France named Alphonse Louis Constant, who called himself Eliphas Levi, drawn in 1856. He did not intend it to be Satan, rather a representation of an embodiment of cosmic forces. You can see several familiar emblems in it. The right hand and the left hand dissolve going up, coagulate going down, the positive and negative crescent moons, the caduceus, the pentagram, which was a benign symbol of Renaissance humanism originally, the torch on the top of the head, and the goat, the male billy goat. But many of these elements became associated with Satan, and the symbol of Anton LaVey drew upon this and incorporated Hebrew letters, which spell out Leviathan or Leviathan, the great fish of the Bible, also associated with Satan. And these things all contributed to the terror of Satanism, which was going to follow. Charlie Manson's cult, Manson's family contributed in the 1960s and 70s. And you might remember the missing children scare of the 1970s. Police records showed that the actual number of missing children did not increase during this time, but Their pictures on milk cartons, which you could find in all of grocery stores, seem to indicate that they were. And of course, the children were being captured by cults, especially satanic cults. 1980, one of the most bizarre and in many ways harmful conspiracy theories of modern times began. And it began with this book, the publication of Michelle Remembers by this woman and her Canadian psychiatrist husband, Lawrence Pasdar. Pasdar put her under psychoanalysis. She was disturbed by a number of things, and he helped her to become convinced that her current psychological confusion was the result of repressed memories from her childhood 35 or 40 years earlier, when her parents were members of a child stealing satanic cult, which kidnapped children and subjected them to all kinds of horrible rituals. They were so horrible that Michelle's mind just shut down and closed in and encapsulated those memories to protect the rest of her psyche. And this led to this phenomenon in pop psychology called the repressed memory movement. And for the rest of that decade and into the 1990s, psychologists were finding hidden memories of satanic cult activity everywhere, across the US, in Europe, in Australia, and in South America as well. Not only, but especially in Christian areas of the world. It doesn't mean that beliefs in Satan increased, but fears of people who do believe in Satan and were acting on the instigation of Satan increased, and they caused panics in many areas of the world. I studied the satanic cult scares of the 1980s, and I applied my model of the attributes of the witch, and I found they were almost identical. For the most part, modern Satanists were not suspected, were not accused of having supernatural powers, with a very few exceptions. There were some testimony that Satanists could change their form and could fly. This phenomenon of levitation was reported in some cases from the movie The Exorcist, you might remember, and that some Satanists were granted demons to guide them. But all the rest of these activities that were found in the classic witch are also found in the satanic demonology. I coined that term, demonology, is a narrative of evil. It explains how the dangerous other is evil, what they do, and how valuable it would be to remove them from society. Any witch hunt, any persecutory movement must be driven by some kind of a narrative like that about the targets of the movement. And these are the attributes of the alleged Satanists in the 1980s and middle 1990s. Elements of Satanism emerge in modern times in the current millennium. You know the Salvadoran gang, which was established in Los Angeles, I think, in the 1960s and 70s, which was really demonized by Donald Trump. In fact, they were really awful. They were really dangerous in many of their instances, but they were not widespread. They were not plotting against us across the country. But a lot of satanic elements are associated with them, and in QAnon. You've heard that as well. The next slide is taken from the book Satanic Panic by our friend Jeffrey Victor, who's now retired from the sociology department of Jamestown Community College in New York. And following that are some pages from a booklet which was recovered during the Great Rumor Panic that occurred in Jamestown in 1988. The stories developed over previous weeks that on Friday, the 13th of May of that year, a satanic cult was going to kidnap a blonde, blue-eyed virgin for its sacrifice. In 1989, when his book went to press, he had constructed this map of satanic rumor panics across the country. In 1993, when his book was published, this map would be almost totally dark. Every state experienced them. And these are a couple of pages from this little book called The Poor Little Witch, published by Chick Publications in Chino, California. You can find them. They're still extant, a Christian publishing house. And it tells the common story of Mandy, who is a young, friendless high school girl, child of a busy single mother. She's not very attractive. She has a skin condition and so on. Her teacher notices her vulnerability and coaxes her into the cult. She goes to a meeting where a child is sacrificed, and she is forced to drink the blood of the child. She resists, but she acquiesces. But when she goes home, she stops by a storefront church where a Christian pastor conducts an exorcism, drives the demons out of her, and she is healed, cleansed by the power of Jesus. But she is caught by the Satanists as she goes home, and she is killed. The story ends with Mandy arriving in heaven. I have been given a signal that I've got to wind this down to allow for some questions, and so I will. This is a much longer list of some significant conspiracy theories that have really shaped modern history of our country. I wanted to mention one of many possible examples I could give: the story of the Bohemian Grove near San Francisco. Any group that employs secrecy as part of its policy, the Masons, the Knights Templars, even the Rotarians, is going to generate rumors. And the Bohemian Grove during the 1940s and 50s had several secret meetings among proponents of and technicians of the Manhattan Project. And I think that's probably where the origin of their satanic reputation began. And among the stories about what went on there have to do with satanic rituals, the killing of children, and cannibalism and vampirism and so on. Area 51, QAnon. And this one, remember this one last year? It was a really fun distraction, I thought, but it still hasn't been solved. This mysterious metallic monolith that appeared in the Utah desert and then reappeared somewhere else. And I think it still hasn't been settled, but it evoked memories of Arthur Clarke and Stanley Kubrick. Solutions will stop here, I think. As I said, the situation is extremely complex. We seek multi-causal explanations. We'd like to have an A causes B, which generates C kind of linear thinking, but culture and the world really don't work that way. Culture is a system, and it's the solution, the re-education of our people need to be systemic. My final thoughts, which I would incorporate into any course on conspiracy theories, are here. Critical thinking, of course, is the goal. And regarding that, in the invitation that Ruth sent around, she cites two articles, one by Ross Douthat and one by Charles Warzel. I recommend them both. They talk about this very problem of what to do about it. If you'd like to contact me, there is my contact information. Ruth asked me to get out so that we can see each other and talk. And let me see if I can do that. And here we are. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Phil. That was,
According to my
perfect.
watch, this is exactly where I wanted to be right now.
yay. I'm seeing a lot of applause here for you, Phil.
Thank you.
We've got everybody on mute, but you do have the capability to unmute yourselves, everybody. So, if the opportunity arises, let me mention.
Do you want to start with what's in the chat?
I will, exactly. And interestingly, the most recent question in the chat was from David, who, building on, or maybe hoping to gain information relating to your last couple of slides, he asked if it's possible to change the opinions of conspiracy theorists, and if so, how?
Yes, it is, and it's very difficult. And a lot of people, there's a huge literature now and growing on this very question. It's extremely complex. I will say from my years of university teaching that yes, it is possible, unless your students are incapable of learning, but it is complex. It requires a presentation of the phenomenon as a system, and looking at that first scientific question: what else is going on? What other factors are involved here? This is part of what I mean by complexity. So I'm going to stop there and not answer David's question. He wants me to go on.
It's a difficult one. Yeah.
Give the answer. It is the $64 question, isn't it?
It is. Now, your son Jeremy has posed the question: does our nation's perpetual thirst for drama and entertainment play a role in the development of conspiracy theories?
I listed a number of factors that I had drawn from the past 14 months, from the beginning of the pandemic in January last year to the present. And you might, if you remember them, and I can send this to anybody who wants it. Idle time was one of them. People have a lot of enforced idle time, and indeed, to answer his question, this is a fascinating topic, a fascinating theme. It's a fascinating mental exercise, and so yes, I think that's part of the explanation.
That's so interesting. I guess, the idle time we've had during the pandemic might be part of the.
That's what I was going to ask. Has there been an uptick in conspiracy theories since COVID started?
That's the point. An uptick, I'm not sure. I think it's been fairly steady, don't you all?
And Kendall posed an interesting question while you were explaining your, was it 12 or 14 criteria of of a witch.
Yeah, 14 attributes.
14, yeah.
Right.
He said, is there a trickster figure common to some of these conspiracy theories?
Interesting question, Kendall, but the trickster is another of my interests. You had no way of knowing that, but it's coincidental, and I would say no. Although the definition of trickster varies tremendously. Colonial writers and scholars and colonial administrators have found elements of Satan in the trickster in third world cultures.
Well, what I was thinking of was the recent
Some
revelations.
effort you can reconstruct the trickster narrative.
Well, what about the recent revelations of the guy behind the QAnon theories that have just come out recently? A lot of what he seems to be doing was just a shit disturbing, just to go out and poke people, just to go out and whack the truck and make the turkeys fly a little faster.
And somewhere in my list of factors, I have the word deception among the causes and political tools that are obviously involved here. And you know, the image from Frank Baum's classic image, actually, I guess it came from the movie, the man behind the curtain, right? That's what Kendall is.
Yeah, he's the author of the Wizard of Oz books. Yeah, so now Kendall's lovely wife, Faith, who many of us know is a professor of history at McGill and a medievalist, by the way,
right.
Says, and this is a tough question, so I'm going to just read it word for word. She says, is QAnon a how do I pronounce that?
Hypertrophy.
A hypertrophy of logic, a case of everything hangs together gone rogue. In other words, is QAnon a sort of dark side of science?
Yeah, if I can just elaborate a little bit.
Please.
One of your solutions for conspiracy theories is critical thinking, but there's something about QAnon, which is like critical thinking on steroids. Everything hangs together. There are no coincidences. Every tiny sign fits together, to make a kind of unified field theory here. And I'm wondering if that's peculiar to QAnon and maybe something that came out of social media, or is there a kind of, in a way, insane logic to
I went through my material pretty quickly. If you consider the lists of the attributes of the witch and the list of the almost identical attributes of the 1980s Satanist, you'll find several of those attributes in QAnon. And when QAnon was being explained by Savannah Guthrie to Donald Trump, do you remember that scene? We found it hard to believe, but you remember it. She was explaining how Donald Trump was regarded as a messiah who was going to save America's children from the clutches of this terrible conspiracy that wanted to kidnap them and eat them and drink their blood. These are ancient elements, ancient fears. They go way, way, way back before Christ to the earliest human records. I think there's been some discovery of them in the manuscripts of ancient Babylon, the Code of Hammurabi. I think that's what I was trying to think of. And yes, it forms a logic, but QAnon was really an evolving thing. My daughter asked, Rebecca asked about whether conspiracy theories were peaking. In fact, different elements were emerging and re-emerging as QAnon seemed to evolve over the months of the past year. Faith, I'm going to stop there. I think you're right. I'm going to stop there.
Well, Phil,
You're
we've
muted,
actually,
Faith. Are you still wanted to say something?
yeah, we've actually come to the end of our time together. I'm reminded of the great Kanto earthquake in 1923 in Japan, where, a natural disaster resulted in the massacre of 6,000 residents of Japan of Korean descent, because somebody like Phil, you mentioned, somebody needed an explanation for how this terrible earthquake could have, and they needed someone to blame. I'd love to
This
hear
is the
more.
basis for hostile interethnic relations all around the world throughout history and into modern times. It's that collective myth of the dangerous other.
The dangerous other. So friends, let's try to educate ourselves and others on these matters, and let's all thank Phil for a terrific talk.
Thanks for being here. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, goodbye everybody.
Please
Thank you.
contact me if you want to follow up with any questions.
Absolutely. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Ruth.
Thank you, Ruth, for hosting.
Thank you.
Really fun. Great to see you all. Bye-bye.
Love you.
Bye. Thank you.
Ruth, you